There was a specific kind of quiet that settled over our house on Friday evenings, not peaceful, not comfortable, just the absence of anything meant for me. My father would be watching sports in the living room. My mother would be reorganizing the kitchen for the third time that week, and my brother would be somewhere in the middle of all of it, the gravitational center of a family I had somehow ended up on the edge of. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened. I am not someone who looks for reasons to feel sorry for herself. I spent 29 years actively talking myself out of noticing things. The way my name was always the last one mentioned. The way my accomplishments landed in the room like a small stone dropped in deep water. A brief ripple, then nothing. I told myself it was normal. I told myself I was being too sensitive. I told myself a lot of things that were not true for a very long time. My name is Maya. I am a 29-year-old software engineer. I work remotely for a company based in Austin, and I have, for the past 4 years, been sending a portion of my paycheck home every single month. My brother's name is Jake. He is 23. He makes music. I want to be fair. Jake is genuinely talented. He can sit down at a piano and play something that makes you stop moving. He has the kind of natural ease with sound that some people are just born with, and I never resented him for it. Not once. What I resented, what I finally let myself name, was the way my family arranged their entire lives around protecting that talent. And the way that arrangement always, somehow, required something from me. This is the story of the night I found out exactly how much. It started with a number, not a dramatic number, not a number that should have stopped me cold the way it did. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my apartment in Denver, eating leftover pasta and half watching something on my laptop, and I got an alert from my credit monitoring app. I have it set to notify me anytime my score changes by more than 10 points. It is the kind of boring, responsible habit I developed in my mid-20s, the kind my mother always called unnecessary. You worry too much, she used to tell me. You always have. The alert said my score had dropped 31 points. I put down my fork. I opened the app and looked at the summary. There was a new hard inquiry on my credit report, dated 6 days ago, from a mortgage lender I had never heard of, in a city I did not live in. I sat there for a long moment. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Identity theft happened all the time. Data breaches happened all the time. There were 100 reasons a stranger's inquiry might end up on my credit report, and most of them had nothing to do with my family. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, which was unusual. She typically let it go to voicemail first, called back when she was ready. The fact that she picked up immediately was the first thing that made something cold move through my chest. Maya, she said. Hi, honey. Hi, I said. Mom, I just got an alert about my credit. There's a hard inquiry from a mortgage company. Do you know anything about that? There was a pause, not a long one, just a half-second too short to be natural. A mortgage company? She said. That's strange. It's from 6 days ago, I said. From a lender in Cincinnati. Another pause. This one longer. I don't know anything about that, she said. She said it the way people say things they have rehearsed. I told her I was going to look into it and let her know what I found. She said that sounded like a good idea. We said goodbye. I hung up and sat in my kitchen and felt the quiet that had followed me all the way from my childhood settle back and around me, like it had never left. I spent that weekend pulling threads. The hard inquiry was real, and it was tied to a loan application. I found that out by calling the lender directly and explaining that I believed my personal information had been used without my authorization. The woman I spoke with was careful and professional. She said she could not share the details of the application over the phone, but she confirmed that my name, my social security number, and my credit history had been included as a cosigner. Cosigner. I asked for the address associated with the application. It was my parents' house. I sat on the floor of my bathroom and I just breathed for a while. I am telling you that because I want you to understand that I was not dramatic about this. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I sat on the cold tile floor, and I breathed and I let what I knew to be true settle into my body before I let myself think about what to do next. Here's what I knew. Someone had used my social security number to apply for a mortgage refinance on my parents' home. My name was on that application as a cosigner. My mother had answered the phone in 2 rings and told me she didn't know anything about it in the careful voice of someone who knows exactly what they've done. Here is what I did not know yet: how long it had been going on, whether this was the first time, what Jake had to do with it. I found out all of that the following Friday. My parents had a tradition of Friday night dinners, not every week, but often enough that it functioned as a kind of family checkpoint, the place where things were announced, celebrated, argued about, and then smoothed over by the time dessert came out. I had been invited to this particular dinner 3 days before my credit alert. The invitation had been warm, unusually warm. I almost didn't go. I went. I drove the 2 hours from Denver to my parents' house in Fort Collins, and I pulled into the driveway and I sat in my car for a moment before going inside. The house looked the same as it always had. The same blue shutters, the same wind chime on the porch that had been there since I was 7, the same light on in the kitchen that meant my mother was inside, moving around, filling the space with purpose the way she always did. I went in. Jake was already there, which was unusual. He typically arrived late, with the comfortable ease of someone who knows the evening will wait for him. But there he was, sitting at the kitchen island, laughing at something on his phone, and he looked up when I walked in and gave me a genuine smile. Jake always had a genuine smile. That was part of what made everything so complicated. "Maya," he said. "You made it." "I made it," I said. My mother hugged me. My father came in from the living room and clapped me on the shoulder the way he did. 2 firm pats, the same as always. We sat down to dinner, and for the first 40 minutes, everything was normal. My mother had made the roast chicken I had liked since childhood. My father talked about a project at work. Jake talked about a collaboration he was working on with a producer in Nashville. I ate my dinner and watched them, and waited. The announcement came over dessert. My mother set down the dish towel she had been holding and looked at Jake with an expression I had seen before, the expression she reserved for the things that mattered. The things that were being protected and nurtured and given room to grow. "We have something exciting to share," she said. Jake leaned back in his chair. He was smiling, but there was something underneath it that I could not name yet. "Jake got into the recording program," my father said. "In Nashville, the one he applied to last fall." I looked at Jake. "That's wonderful," I said, and I meant it. "Congratulations. It's a 12-month program," my mother said. "Fully immersive. He'll be working with producers, doing sessions, really building out his portfolio. It's not cheap," my father said in the tone he used when something was expensive but worth it. "How much?" I asked. There was a brief silence. "With the relocation and the program fees and the studio time, we're looking at around $42,000, my mother said. "Over the year?" I nodded slowly. "And you have that?" My mother looked at my father. My father looked at his plate. "We're refinancing the house," my mother said. "We found a good rate. It made sense." The room was very quiet. I put down my fork. I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I looked at Jake, who was no longer smiling in quite the same way, and I watched something shift behind his eyes, a flicker of something I would understand more fully later. "The refinance," I said. "Is my name on that application?" The silence that followed was different from all the other silences I had cataloged in that house. It was not the silence of something being smoothed over. It was the silence of something being found out. My mother said, "Maya, is my name on the application?" I said again. Not to question this time. My father set down his fork. He looked at me in the way he looked at things that needed to be managed. "Your credit score is better than ours," he said. "The rate we qualified for on our own wasn't. You used my social security number," I said. "It's a co-signer arrangement," my mother said quickly. "It doesn't mean," without asking me, I said. The words sat in the middle of the table like something no one wanted to touch. Jake said, "Wait." His voice had changed. "You didn't tell her?" My mother looked at him. "You told me she agreed," he said. His voice was very careful now, very controlled. "You said you talked to Maya and she was on board." "It was a family decision," my father said. "I didn't agree to anything," I said. "I didn't know about this until 6 days ago when my credit score dropped 31 points and I got an alert on my phone." Jake stood up from the table. I had never seen him do that before. Not like this. Not with that particular energy. A kind of cold, precise fury that did not look anything like the easygoing brother I had spent 23 years knowing. He walked to the kitchen window and stood there with his back to us. And when he turned around, his face was something I had not seen before. You told me she was fine with it, he said to our parents. You told me you talked to her. Jake, my mother said. How long, he said, have you been doing things like this? What came out over the next hour was not what I expected. My parents had been managing money in ways that neither Jake nor I had known about in full. The refinance was not the first time my name had been used. There was a credit card opened 2 years ago that had my name on it as an authorized user and had been used for household expenses I had never been told about. I had not noticed because my credit report had dozens of lines and I had not been looking for it specifically. The card had been paid on time, which was why my score had not been affected. The refinance was different because it was a hard inquiry, a significant one, and because the mortgage market had shifted and the approval was taking longer than expected, and that was why the alert had finally reached me. Jake had not known about the credit card either. He had known about the plan to refinance. He had been told, clearly and specifically, that I had agreed to be a co-signer. He had asked because, and this was the part that broke something open in me, he had asked because he knew. He knew what it was like to be on the receiving end of things arranged on his behalf without his full understanding. He knew because for years, he had been handed opportunities funded by a family economy that he had not been given the complete picture of, and some part of him had always felt the shape of what was missing even when he could not name it. He had asked our parents directly, "Does Maya know about this? Is she okay with it?" They had said yes. He sat back down at the table, not next to our parents, across from them, next to me, and we both looked at the two people who had built their family around one axis: Jake's talent, Jake's future, Jake's needs, and had quietly, consistently, arranged everything else around that center. Including me, including my credit score, my financial history, my signature, offered up without my knowledge because what was mine had always functioned, and this family, as a resource to be allocated. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. It was not rage. It was not the burning kind of anger that demands something. It was something quieter and more devastating, the feeling of a long equation finally balancing. All those years of being the one who managed, who paid, who sent the monthly transfer without complaint, who told herself she was helping because she loved them. All those years of being sensible and low maintenance and easy, of not needing much, of not asking for the roast chicken and the warm announcement and the expression my mother saved for the things that mattered. I had not needed much. I had just needed to be asked. There is a concept in psychology called the parentified child. It describes someone who takes on adult emotional or practical responsibilities within a family system. The child who becomes a source of stability, financial or emotional, for the adults around them. The child who learns early that their role is to give rather than receive, to manage rather than feel, to be useful rather than be loved in the uncomplicated way children are supposed to be loved. I had read about it before, in the abstract way you read about things that describe your life when you are not quite ready to claim them. I had thought, that sounds familiar. And then I had closed the tab and gone back to work. Sitting at that table, I claimed it. I had been parentified, not maliciously maybe. I do not think my parents are monsters. I think they are people who made choices and told themselves the choices were fair because no one complained. I had not complained. I had been the good one, the steady one, the one who had a real job and didn't need them to show up the way Jake needed them to show up. I had been so effective at not needing things that they had stopped factoring my needs into the equation at all. And then they had taken the next logical step in that equation and started treating my assets the same way they treated everything else I'd offered, as available, as usable, as theirs to arrange. Jake was quiet for a long time after everything came out. Then he said something I will not forget. He said, "I'm not going." My mother looked at him. "To Nashville," he said. "I'm not going." "Not like this." Jake Cake. "Not with her money," he said. "Not with something she didn't agree to." My father started to say something about the rate, about the timing, about how it was already in process and difficult to unwind. Jake said he didn't care. My mother said it wasn't as simple as that they had obligations, that everything was interconnected. Jake said he understood that it was interconnected. That was exactly the problem. I watched my younger brother, the one our parents had organized their lives around, the one whose talent had always been the center of the family's gravity, draw a line in the sand on my behalf. And I understood, for the first time, that he had been carrying his own version of this weight. Not the same as mine, never the same, but the particular weight of being someone else's hope and investment. of being the recipient of sacrifices that had never fully been named and therefore could never fully be refused. We had both been shaped by this family, just in different directions. I did not stay for the rest of the evening. I helped clear the table because that is the kind of person I am, and then I got my jacket and I went to the door. My mother followed me. She stood in the hallway with her hands folded, and she looked at me with an expression I had not seen from her before. Not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to it, something that had been pressed flat under years of practicality and was only now finding its way to the surface. "I know you're upset," she said. "I'm not upset," I said. And I meant it. I was not upset. I was something past upset. I was clear. "I need you to remove my name from the application. Maya, if we do that the rate, I need you to remove my name from the application," I said again. "And I need to see a full accounting of the credit card, every charge, every month, going back to when it was opened." She was quiet. "And I need you to understand," I said, "that the monthly transfer is starting this month." Her expression changed. "I have been sending money home for 4 years," I said. "I did it because I wanted to help. But I can't help a family that uses my information without asking." "That's not help. That's something else." "You make more than enough," she started. "That's not the point," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "I didn't think you'd mind." And there it was. The whole architecture of it in one sentence. I didn't think you'd mind. Because I had never minded. Or never said I did. And somewhere along the way that had become permission. That had become, Maya is fine. Maya doesn't need anything. Maya's resources are available. Maya will understand. I had spent 29 years being someone who wouldn't mind. I minded. "Good night, Mom," I said. I walked out to my car. The wind chime on the porch made its small, familiar sound behind me. The night was cold and clear, the kind of Colorado night that feels like it goes all the way up, and I stood next to my car for a moment and just breathed. Then I got in and I drove home. I want to tell you what happened in the weeks after, because I think it matters. I contacted the mortgage lender and formally withdrew my consent as cosigner, explaining that my name had been added without my authorization. They were legally required to process the removal. The refinance fell through at the rate my parents had been counting on. I went through every line in my credit report, every single one, and I found the credit card and I requested documentation from the issuer. 2 years of charges, groceries, utility bills, a flight to Nashville for Jake's audition, a car repair. Things that were, in another context, the ordinary texture of a family's life. Things that had been charged to my name without my name being asked. I disputed the authorized user status. It was removed. I stopped the monthly transfer. Jake called me the week after the dinner. He had done some thinking, he said. He had talked to our parents more than once, and he had started asking questions he had never thought to ask, about money, about where things had come from, about what had been arranged on his behalf over the years and how. He did not like what he found out. Not all of it. He was processing. He said, "I'm sorry. I know it wasn't my fault, but I'm still sorry." I told him I knew it wasn't his fault. He said he was thinking about the Nashville program differently now, about whether he wanted to go, and if so, how he wanted to fund it, on his own terms, with a clear picture of where the money was coming from. He said he had started looking at grants and partial scholarships he had dismissed before because our parents had made the financing sound settled. I told him that sounded like a good idea. I told him I hoped he went. I meant it. My parents were a harder conversation and an ongoing one. My mother called me 3 times in the first week. The first 2 times I let it go to voicemail. The third time I answered and we talked for an hour, and it was not a good conversation, but it was an honest one. She said things like, "We didn't think it would hurt anything, and we were going to tell you, and you've always been so capable." I said things like, "Capable isn't the same as available." And asking me and assuming I'd say yes are not the same thing. And I needed to know my name was mine. She cried a little. I felt the familiar pull to soften everything, to tell her it was okay, to be the Maya who smoothed things over so everyone could get back to the way things had been. I did not do that. I told her I loved her. I told her I was not cutting anyone off. I told her that what I was doing was not punishment. It was just me, finally, being honest about where I stopped and they began. That boundary was not dramatic. It did not arrive with yelling or ultimatums. It arrived the way all real things arrive. Quietly, and after a long time coming. A few weeks after all of this, I was sitting at my kitchen table again, Late evening, the city outside my window going about its business, the apartment quiet in the way I had chosen rather than the way I had inherited. I was working on something, a side project, a small piece of software I had been building for fun, something that had nothing to do with anyone's future except mine. I thought about a version of myself at 22, fresh out of college, setting up that first automatic transfer because it felt like what good daughters did. Because I had more than enough and they needed help, and I was capable and capable people help. I had not thought about what I was building in agreeing to that arrangement. I had not thought about how quietly a habit becomes an expectation, and how quietly an expectation becomes an assumption, and how quietly an expectation becomes an assumption, and how quietly an assumption becomes something taken. I am not angry at that 22-year-old. She was doing the best she could with the map she'd been given, but I am done living by that map. There is a version of this story where I am the villain, where I am the difficult daughter who cut off her family over a credit inquiry and stopped sending money and made everything hard. My mother would probably tell it that way at least for a while. I understand that. I am not asking to be the hero of anyone else's version. I am just the person who finally, at 29, on a cold Friday night in October, stood at the door of a house that had always asked more of me than it gave, said what needed to be said, and walked out to her car under a sky that went all the way up. I drove home. I worked on my project. I slept without my phone on the nightstand, which I had not done in years, because I had always kept it close in case someone needed something. No one needed anything. I was fine.